Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm your host, Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, retail tech investor, and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you the insights from some of retail's leaders and legends, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. Bluecore's software solution turns anonymous online shoppers into known customers and repeat customers. Bluecore enables retailers to personalize and optimize their email, SMS, and site marketing campaigns by delivering targeted and relevant messages based on where every customer is in their journey. Bluecore replaces annoying high-volume messaging with high-value messaging. Customers include Alo Yoga, Neiman Marcus, and Gap. Here's my KPOV for week ending February 17th. Valuations have been incredibly challenging for both tech platforms and brands over the past 2.5 years. Last week, Guess stepped up to buy Rag & Bone for $56.5 million. They partnered with WHP, who will be taking on the rights to the IP. Revenues for last year were $250 million, with EBITDA coming in at about $18 million. So the purchase price was well under 1 year sales and just slightly above 3 times EBITDA. Again, valuations are way down. Rag & Bone has had some near-term challenges as it lost its co-founder as the head of design, recently replaced within the last 8 months. Let's see what happens with this acquisition going forward. Will it be more like drag and moan, or will the cash infusion enable Rag & Bone to thrive into the future? On today's flight of the Retail Pilot, we have Lori Coulter, the co-founder and CEO of Summersalt, a lifestyle brand known for its data-backed fit and designer quality products without the designer price tag. Lori and her co-founder, Reshma Chattaram Chamberlin, launched Summersalt to change the conversation around swimwear. The product is data-backed with 1.5 million measurements taken from 10,000 women's body scans. In 2020, Lori was named one of Inc. magazine's top 100 female founders. Prior to launching Summersalt, Lori launched a mass customization startup to incorporate body scanning and made-to-order manufacturing. Lori holds an MBA from Washington University in St. Louis and a BBA from Baylor University. She serves on the board of trustees at WashU and champions inclusive economic development and entrepreneurship as member of the university's Scandalaria Center National Council. Outside of Summersalt, Lori enjoys spending time with her husband and 2 sons and exploring the world through her love of travel and adventure. And Lori has been kind enough to extend us a 25% off discount code, PILOT25, for 1 week upon the launch of this episode. Welcome to the Retail Pilot, Lori. It's great to have you on today's flight.
Thanks so much. Really thrilled to be here. And you do such a great job of covering the entire industry.
Well, thank you. It's great to have you and looking forward to hearing about your story. And why don't you tell us how you started, what the path was that led you to the founding of Summersalt?
So a lot of people don't realize, but my co-founder and I are both serial founders. So 10, maybe 15 plus years ago now, I had launched a business doing digital body scanning and made to order swimwear in partnership with a major retailer. We were in store doing digital body scanning, and we were making swimwear custom in as fast as 10 days back to the store. And what that really did that's relevant for Summersalt still to this day is we had scanned 10,000 women, made a swimsuit for each of them. These are women in 20 plus cities across the country, not necessarily fit models in New York or LA, but truly, the middle of America, and optimize our fit in a way that was both flattering. And by the way, when you bring women back to the store 10,000 times, you get 10,000 different points of feedback and then some. And so we really had the perfect fit for swimwear. And then in, let's call it was June of 2016, I was looking at what my next steps would be. Had been doing a ton of private label work with various mid-sized retailers. So we would design and manufacture for, different e-commerce brands, stores, but then also leisure resorts. And I didn't love that business where you really get squeezed on margins on both sides, both from a factory as well from the major, partner of the retailer. And my co-founder, who is also based in St. Louis, Missouri, owned an agency and had been working with some of the larger direct-to-consumer brands, venture-backed at the time. And she really challenged me to look hard at the direct-to-consumer space, which I had already been doing, but she really confirmed my interest in the opportunity as it relates to direct-to-consumer. I went away from lunch at Chipotle with her, not intended to be life defining, wrote the initial business plan and strategy for what is now Summersalt, and went back to her late December of 2016 to hire her agency. Ironically, she declined my business, but not to be detoured. I continued to work on the concept, was actually pitching PR teams in New York in late January of 2017. Ran into her at an event, and on the spot, Reshma, my now co-founder, said, "I'm interested, but would you consider a co-founder?" So we joined forces, and the rest is really history.
And 3.5 million swimwear units later, here we are.
Swimwear and garments, but yes, here we are. It was absolutely and has been an absolutely amazing ride and dream come true. We started working in late January of 2017 to be, up and running and launched late May. We made May 23rd. It was absolutely obvious day one that we had bottled sort of magic as it relates to both the consumer, press, and the brand. And I don't know if, if you or a lot of listeners have been part of a product launch where it's absolutely gone from a PowerPoint presentation to physical product as selling, but you always have that feeling of, is this going to sell? And we still get the feeling, although we have a lot of products that do sell, so that's helpful, but it was amazing to watch. We sold out of everything, within the first month almost, and came back and really knew late in the year that we were onto something.
Was this post an early raise? Had you already found some investors, which I assume could not have been easy in that it's a women's led startup? And as I think there's less than 5% or some statistic out there.
2%, if I'm, correcting you. Less than 2%.
Okay, less than 5. 2 is less. And we get less than 5, maybe 2, 3% of companies that are backed to women's led. And the majority of VCs are guys. So how challenging was it to go out there and raise money with your PowerPoint presentation?
So it's tough. And so 2 women founders out of the Midwest selling swimsuits is a tough sell, just in general. We almost didn't get off the ground, but we did raise $600,000 from 2 what I would call super angels in the Midwest, as well as several women who just really stepped up to really allow us to get off the ground. It was obvious, that we had the VC metrics post-launch. And so, that sort of top 1% from a growth and revenue kind of trajectory is what they're looking for. We had that within really the first 6 weeks, but certainly within the first year. And from that point forward, it did get easier, but still to this day, it's never easy. We aren't selling to our consumer when we're pitching the business from a fundraising perspective. It's really about making sure that the investor understands and believes in what we're doing.
And since you've launched, I believe you've raised close to or just over 26 million. So you've done a few rounds.
More than that now, but yes, done several rounds. We're considered, growth or later stage growth from a stage perspective. We've really seen it all in our short amount of time. We were barely 2.5 years old when COVID hit. So thankfully we had just raised a Series B round, a larger round. So we were in a good position from a cash perspective, but like everyone else, we saw, revenue drop 65% just overnight. Thankfully, the consumer did come back in May of 2020 Ironically, swimwear is one of the garment categories that did quite well through the pandemic, but we didn't know. And then certainly we fought the supply chain challenges just like everyone else. And then now, post COVID, we're seeing sort of, I think still the pendulum swing kind of to balance as it relates to the consumer as well as fundraising and investors. So it's been an interesting time, but we've learned a ton.
How do you and Reshma split your responsibilities? What areas are you focused on mostly, and what is she focused on?
So people are always interested in that question. And one of the best decisions I ever made was to partner with Reshma. It was truly a risk, right? We were not personal friends. That is not our story. We had never worked together, but I admired her work and had for a long time, which is why I, wanted her to be the person to do all of our brand, our UX as it relates to the site, as well as the continued creative for Summersalt. And when we were kind of joining forces in late January of 2017, it was obvious to me that it never dawned on me that it was the wrong decision. I mean, I thought from day one that this was the right partnership. We always say that I'm sort of a business person plus merchant with a creative bent. She's a true creative with a business bent. And that combination of kind of two sides of the same coin works magic. And we really challenge each other, hold each other accountable in the areas where we may be weaker. But then it's magic when we're brainstorming, particularly on strategy, because two brains working together is really that are quite complementary is just phenomenal. And then from a responsibility perspective, all things product rolls up through me. So that's product development, design, merchandising. And then I have all of the administrative functions as well. So think finance, legal, HR. And then ultimately, I'm responsible for the P&L of the business, but Reshma really closely manages, all things marketing, brand. She's got the site itself and those teams.
When you were looking for investors, how were you vetting, or what were you looking for specifically in the type of investor you wanted involved with Summersalt?
So from an investor perspective, really it's like a marriage. You want someone that you're going to be happy to have around for a lengthy period of time. And the last 3-4 years with COVID and everything that's come since really proves out you never know what's coming around the corner. So first and foremost, we wanted people that we wanted to do business with. It's just not worth it to deal with people that are, not going to be good partners on day one. And then from that point forward. But more than that, we needed people that were knowledgeable in the space, were knowledgeable at the various stages of fundraising. So when you raise venture capital, the early stages are quite different than the later stages. And so that expertise along the way. And then, really complementary to the investors that we already had around the table. So looking for skill sets that complement those that are already in our deal. And it's worked very well. We've really enjoyed working with all the investors in our deal, even though it has been a challenging period, COVID and otherwise, but it's been, I would do it all over again with those that are on the table.
Looking at the swim space today, seems like it's highly competitive. It appears that most of your swimsuits are under $100. What is the secret sauce? What's the special ingredient about Summersalt that you believe sets you apart from others who are in the space?
So what's fascinating today, it's the secret sauce is the same secret sauce that it was day one. And for us, that's about presenting the designs in a way that really empower our consumer to feel confident and to engage with life. From day one, it was about encouraging her to put on that swimsuit, book that trip, engage with life, not to withhold. Bar none, that's the mission of Summersalt, and that's what we continue to do today. The competitive environment is quite interesting. So historically, there were probably 3 or 4 private label brands, probably 50% of the market. Then you had what I would call licensed product, where the major design houses would license out the rights to make swimwear under the label with various different manufacturers. That was more the department store business, and let's call it 35 to 40% of the market. And still, that business is alive and well today. And then if you went to Swim Market, and probably still today, there are 10,000 brands that never get to $1 million in revenue. I mean, it's just amazing how many swimwear brands are out there in the market. And for us, we knew that none of those different business models really was doing a good job at building a relationship directly with the consumer. So if you think about the license model, by definition, there's no connection to the end consumer, right? There's many, many middlemen. There's the brand, there's the salespeople that rep that brand and that label. Then there's the design and manufacturing house, the group that's actually licensing the brand and then repping the brand to the major retailer. And then again, it's so far separated from the consumer and her needs that it was ripe for disruption. So that was, the business model all along was built on that premise. The private label brands in the swim space had seen all kinds of change. So Victoria's Secret in particular, if you remember, in late 2016 had pulled out of swimwear altogether. And the swim was a major portion of their customer acquisition strategy, right? If you remember, they were sending tens of millions of books at one point in the summer and really all year round for swimwear. And while swim might not be her most frequent category to purchase, she's very loyal. So once she finds a swimsuit that fits, she's going to come back over and over again. And that's why the fit is so important. And that's why the brand, the feel, the way it makes her, engage with life is so important as well.
Looking at your website, I can see that inclusivity, both in terms of size, of ethnicity, are important to the brand. But also you talk a lot about fit, and you have a real fit expertise in terms of background coming into the business. And then there's also sustainability. So it seems like those are three very important factors to Summersalt to set you apart from those around you. How would you quantify those in terms of their importance, or how do you lean into them with the brand?
So from an inclusivity perspective, we believe it's a baseline for a swimwear brand. Swim had been done in sort of an over-sexualized, what I would argue, dated kind of way for so long. That's really, brands couldn't get out of that cycle of how they were presenting women. And by the way, that look on social media is quite boring and tired. And so with the importance of influencers, social media, as well as just the consumer's values around how women are being presented, it just seems like Summersalt should have been here all along, right? Like, why is this a novel concept? So it was obvious that consumers loved the way we were presenting the brand day one. It really is who we are as founders. And I hope that comes across. I mean, we're not pretending to be something we're not here. This is about encouraging women to engage with life. Sustainability is interesting. If you notice, there are brands that push the sustainability factor way more than Summersalt. But for us, it's just absolutely about doing the right thing, making those intentional decisions. We made them day one. So for instance, recycled packaging, recycled nylon, all of those were components of the brand from launch. And we would never say that we're perfect. Anyone in the retail industry that says they're absolutely perfect is incorrect. It's just really not possible. But we make those intentional, better for the world decisions at every point in our supply chain, in the way that we're doing business. And it really adds up. The impact is truly incredible. And the consumer expects it, not just from Summersalt, but from every brand, in my opinion, in today's world. And then from a fit perspective, again, it's, absolutely when you're selling product on a digital platform, that, making sure you get that fit right the first time and then guiding her to the right fit. is just so important to the core of the business. And we knew that in swimwear is a garment where women can have high anxiety about their bodies, and we want to make it so much easier on them and, encourage them to engage with life.
I would think that fit slash returns would be a big challenge, especially in that there aren't many points of distribution outside of your e-commerce site where a customer can actually try the product on. Can you share with us any sense around the size of issue returns are for?
So what I would tell you is, from our comps in the public markets, we comp the major retailers very closely. So our returns are definitely not worse. In fact, I would argue they're better than almost anyone that I'm seeing publicly. So that's exciting. It is important that you're managing returns at every stage. So it's complex, right? You're managing returns as it relates to inventory. You don't want to overbuy if you know if product is coming back. You need to manage it from a timeline perspective. So making sure the consumer understands those policies and that you're physically able to manage those returns, and then restoring, inspecting, and then fully restoring any product that's coming back to you from that perspective. And then finally, just making sure that you're on top of it on a go forward basis. And again, this is where having that direct link to the consumer matters, because we don't just look at return rate by style. We look at return rate by style, by size, by color, and we optimize accordingly. And so every time we're launching a new product, and then really our core product as well, we're optimizing fit at the infinite detail on a go forward basis. And it's amazing what that ongoing process can do from an overall returns management perspective. So it's the tech, right? Like, if we didn't have the direct link to the consumer and the technology in place to gather that information. So we ask her, is it too big? Is it too small? Is it too long? Is it too short? And then we can calibrate in an algorithmic way, where we absolutely need to land and where we should improve.
Let's take a quick break with a word from our sponsors. Predict Spring is a global point-of-sale platform live in 22 countries. The platform includes mobile POS, endless aisle, fulfillment, inventory management, and clienteling, creating a true omni experience for customers and associates. Predict Spring powers Suit Supply, Converse, Lovesac, Decium, Janie and Jack, and Bouclair. Breakfast helps brands like HelloFresh, Perfume.com, and QVC increase revenue across Meta and TikTok by creating hundreds of user-generated content video ads. The Breakfast Creator Network, with over 5,000 strong, produces original content that is authentic to each platform and built to drive performance, all done in as little as 3 weeks. Check out breakfast.io. That's BRKFST.io. As you think about scaling Summersalt from today, what is, I guess, the majority, if not 99 to close to 100% of the businesses being done online D2C, what's next for you for growth?
So what's fascinating, stage appropriately, we had really withheld doing any physical retail through COVID for obvious reasons. And in fact, had planned several stores and then just sort of abandoned that plan, as you can imagine. So we're coming back in some ways, playing catch up a little bit on the physical store side, but we do have stores launched in Nashville, in West Palm Beach, and then also in South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, which are fantastic in partnership with Tanger. So encourage everyone to take a look. And we've seen incredible results out of those stores. So I anticipate both additional outlet locations as well as flagship locations over the next couple of years. And then we are known for our collaborations, particularly with other major brands. And we have some really exciting partnerships that include physical retail as well as collaborations coming later this year. So I can't give you too much more than that, other than to say we will be really excited to get those launched and off the ground.
So will those collaborations be in the form of wholesale? How will those manifest?
So we will be selling the product, the partner will be selling the product, and we'll include some physical retail as well.
Is wholesale part of your
Yeah,
future strategy?
absolutely. We probably do more wholesale than people realize. And, but we've been very selective in our partners on the wholesale side to date, which I think has served us well. And so just making sure that we are meeting the consumer where she lives in a way that is more convenient for her, serves her needs, as opposed to just going widespread and showing up too frequently.
If you were to look out 3 years from now at your pie of sales, what percent would you say would be online to stores to wholesale? Where do you think you'll be by 2007, 8? Where would you like to get to?
I think in the next, let's call it 3 to 5 years, I would anticipate we'd be 65% direct to consumer, the remainder split between stores and wholesale. I think that's a really healthy mix for most apparel brands.
Got it. Yeah, I'm hearing, a lot more brands looking at wholesale as an opportunity where that really wasn't an opportunity for quite some time.
Yeah, and I think if you look at some of the direct to consumer brands throughout their life cycle, so take maybe a Lululemon, right? They are old school direct to consumer and that they are primarily sold through their own stores. But if you think about it, there was a period of time when they were partnering with studios. Now, this is not the appropriate model for Summersalt, but they were partnering with studios that were sort of good influencers in the activewear space. And so that model, I think, applies to a lot of direct to consumer brands. There's an area of retail where you can meet your consumer's need, educate her, but still remain true to the core of the brand.
Let's talk a little bit about marketing. It's interesting to me that this swimwear brand grew out of Missouri. No beaches. You got some lakes. But
Mississippi River.
anyway,
No one swims in the Mississippi River, by the way.
that's right. So how do you get the brand out there? What is the overarching marketing strategy today with the customer acquisition costs being quite high? How do you rein that in? Where are you getting the bang for your buck to let people know about Summersalt?
So from day one, I think it's a misnomer that one channel is always the right channel from a brand perspective. For us, it's really about the consumer experience, the experiencing the brand in a 360-degree world. So of course, initially it does start with press validation and just, for us, it was making sure we had that top tier representation day one. We leveraged that press both to drive traffic to the site still today, but also to garner influencer and consumer interest. Again, that third party validation is super important. Early on, we used that kind of validation and, by the way, content to really test how the brand was playing in the minds of the consumer. And then sometimes we can still use that content to lean into creative, both on social media as well as our own channels, so CRM, paid and otherwise. And then finally, direct mail is a big component of any sort of direct to consumer marketing strategy. And then finally, I think those collaborations, partnerships, showing up in physical retail at the right time of year in the right place is really important for the consumer. So it's about having multiple touch points, never about just one working in isolation.
Is there one area of marketing that's most exciting or showing the greatest promise for you right now?
I mean, I think like any other industry right now, there's so much opportunity in the AI space. It's not just in marketing, right? It's everywhere, but the opportunity to anticipate, to create, content for your consumer, to show up at the right time, those opportunities are endless. And I do believe we are going to see clear winners who are quick to adopt, test, and move forward, particularly on the acquisition side of the house, because to your point, the economic impacts are so great over time.
Are you dabbling at all with connected TV?
We've had good success with connected TV. And of course, it's always part of our strategy. And I really like the efficiency gains, the data feedback that we get. One of the things that we have going for us as a direct to consumer brand is we really do have those data signals across the ecosystem, and connected TV is great that way. It's almost real time.
And do you leverage the consumer? Are you using her content, or are you relying mostly on your own?
So we have a Jet Setters program, which is essentially a group of, I'd call them influencers, anywhere from maybe 20,000 followers up to 150,000 followers, where they are known friends of the brand, partnering with us to create content. We're supplying them in many cases with garments, swimwear, whatever it is that really meets their needs. And we are absolutely thrilled with the content that they create. Beautiful, creative, natural, organic content that we are able to leverage, and in partnership with the influencer, really promote their brand as well as the Summersalt brand.
With your background steeped in technology, take us through a little bit about your journey building your tech stack and scaling the company, what it was that you looked for and what you've implemented.
So one of the interesting parts about building a brand from a PowerPoint presentation to selling 3.5 million garments is that really everything has to be stage appropriate. We talk a lot about stage appropriate challenges. You don't want to invest too early. So for instance, we were on day one, the very basic version of Shopify. Now today we're on Shopify Plus, and we probably have, our ecosystem of apps, not just on Shopify, but in general is around, 80 different platforms. But when you have 5 employees, you cannot manage 80 different platforms, right? So it's really about prioritizing for that stage of the business what is most important, both for the consumer as well as for operational efficiency, and then making sure you stay within your means. But then you very quickly outgrow that stage and just have to be rapidly looking for those solutions that are stage appropriate along the way. And that continues to this day. We're actually at the stage where we're trying to eliminate platforms. So we're looking for, platforms that do more than one thing. And so we only have to manage one platform at a time. So, for instance, if we have 5 apps that can be accomplished in one app, we're definitely going to take a look, because the management of 5 apps is just more difficult.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I'm seeing, companies like a Narvar, which is an OG in the space, and they really cover the post-purchase experience. But there are a lot of companies within the post-purchase experience that do elements of it. So I think brands have to really decide, do I go with one company that can do probably 90% or 85% of what those other solutions do, not 100, but then you only have to manage one company? Or do I try to rely on 5 companies that can do everything that's best in class? And I think if I'm hearing you, and I would certainly agree, I think I would lean to having one company do more than many companies do things that are slightly better.
And like I said, it does depend on what stage of the business you're at, what your
Yeah.
budgets are, that sort of thing. But it is an interesting challenge. The other area that I find particularly challenging at the stage we're at is that there's a ton of customization to be had, particularly as it relates to the Shopify site. And we can do some really exciting, cutting edge kind of tech builds, but we have to make sure that that's the right thing to do from a standardization perspective, and that we're not complicating our lives downstream too much from an overall tech overhead and build perspective. And that has caught a lot of very well-known brands. They became too customized too early, and then the overhead to manage becomes quite difficult.
As I may have mentioned to you in the past, I don't know if I did or we discussed it, I'm an advisor to a company out of Israel called Sizer. And what they do is they help women determine the best possible size, whether it's reading their body through an iPhone or through an iPad. Are you looking at any technology in that place just to better improve the fit, or is that something that is not on brand or not in your scope?
No, I think we're looking at all technologies. Anything that serves the consumer better, we're open to taking a look. And we certainly, I think Sizer is quite interesting. And then there are other complementary types of technologies that are as well. It's
Oh
part
yeah,
of my
there.
job. And one of the things that we've implemented at Summersalt that I think you'll find fascinating is we have an ongoing, tech vendor list, really all types of vendors, but particularly technology, that we keep a running list, who referred, what the technology is, where we think it stage appropriately falls. Is it today? Is it a year from now? Is it 3 years from now? Is it too small for Summersalt? And we refresh that and take a look quarterly, and we assemble it on an ongoing basis. But
Yeah.
it's fascinating. Then we highlight those that we think are on the roadmap and then come back to it from a solution perspective. So it's not rocket science, but it certainly is helpful because there's just so much to keep your mind around and on top of at this point in time.
There's a lot out there, as you mentioned earlier, just around the area of AI alone. Anything that you're seeing or using today more specifically that's AI, and or what's AI next for you?
So I think we're using AI in many different areas. So everything from customer support for Somersault's customer happiness. There's a ton of I built into our macros in regards to serving the consumer and the inbound inquiries that we get both on text and as well as email and then site chat. That's fascinating. And I think it really serves the customer well in a very timely, quick fashion. So easy, wins from that perspective. On the flip side of that, customer journeys on pre, during, and post sale from a site perspective, there's all kinds of AI written into the collections, what products she's seeing, even our email flows at various stages of the journey are AI driven. One area I think is fascinating is AI driven organic search, and so, really optimizing from a search perspective to make sure the consumer is finding us, particularly with long tail keywords. So, those are, just off the bat, and then never mind all the merchandising driven types of AI enhancements that I think at this point in time are in the earlier stages of development. I think there's more coming there from the vendors. So, some areas of AI are further along, for instance, customer support, because I think it's so obvious. But the merchandising and inventory driven side of things is coming next.
What would be the three largest challenges facing Somersault today?
I think number one is just really think about what's going on overall with retail and the consumer. We are back to a post COVID, I hope, normal environment. I prefer no more once in a generation type of events, if possible. And so just sort of taking a breath, understanding what is the overall competitive environment, what is the future of retail, not just for Somersault, because we are writing our own journey, right? We know our plan internally and where we believe the industry is going. But understanding what's really happening from a consumer behavior perspective is really important at this point in time. What's going to happen with the physical malls? I mean, I think we would all agree that we're likely overstored still, and continuing to see kind of that journey and what that does from a overall pricing perspective, I think is fascinating. So that's number one, just the overall macro retail consumer environment. Number two, challenge wise, fundraising is interesting right now. Somersault's venture capital back, and venture capital is quite challenged, particularly at the later stages, as we just aren't seeing IPOs in the consumer space. There's glimmers of hope, which we're excited about. And I think as we continue to see, this year, the markets start to normalize again, and that's really going to benefit the industry in general. Consumer, late stage growth, direct to consumer, all have been hindered over the last 24 months. You could argue that some of the IPOs that happened in 2021 were overvalued. But I think really the entire industry has been impacted more negatively than deserved. In the end, we still sell a consumer product to a consumer, and we are creating value for that consumer, and that won't change. And like I said before, the Lululemons of the world were the old school direct to consumer model. That model is still going to remain, with the e-commerce and the digital part, the experience being important, but not the only most important factor. And then the third kind of challenge I think that we're facing is just to really, in a post-COVID world, come back and tighten our merchandising strategy. So for instance, Summersalt, day one, we knew that we didn't want to just be a swimwear brand. It was about building out other categories and doing it quickly before we were cemented as a swimwear brand in the mind of the consumer. So we were quite intentional. But with COVID, we leaned into what I would call the stay-at-home categories. By the way, we were already in loungewear and pajamas and cozy, comfy sweaters pre-March 2020. So we had launched those categories, but it hadn't been very long. But we were able to really, lean into those categories through COVID. And then now coming out of COVID, we're going back to our initial messaging, which is really about filling her suitcase for adventures big and small. And so tightening up the merchandising on our site and our offering and collection to make sure we're meeting her where she is at this moment in time.
If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice while you were launching this business, what would it be?
So what I would tell you is valuations absolutely peaked in early 2021. And I would have really thought hard about what that meant for Summersalt and our investor group at that point in time. I think every founder in the D2C space probably believes that, but hindsight is 2020 for sure.
Ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
Okay. Favorite streamed show?
Yellowstone, and all the iterations.
1888 or 1923?
1923.
Favorite vacation spot?
I love Maui, so absolutely my number one. Domestically on the continental U.S., I really like Kiowa, South Carolina too. Just totally low key, laid back, great food.
Not Branson, Missouri.
That's third.
Which celebrity post were you most proud of?
Jennifer Garner. And I love Jennifer Garner because she's a really good representation of Summersalt as a brand, right? She's joyful, she's fun, she's approachable. She's everything that Summersalt should be.
Who would you most like to meet?
I'm really interested in meeting Serena Williams for a couple of reasons. One, I think she's a brilliant marketer, but two, her work in the venture space, particularly with women founders, is fascinating, and would love to get to know her.
Finally, top apparel brand for a collaboration.
Oh, this one is harder. We have done some really interesting collaborations, including Rifle Paper Company, Diane von Furstenberg. Both were absolutely phenomenal for us. But if I had to pick one, I would love to do a Gucci collaboration and really knock it out of the park from a swimwear perspective.
And with that, we'll land this flight of the retail pilot. Lori Coulter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Ken. Really fun. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the retail pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.